Hello and welcome to Flap TV. This episode, our special guest on the left, Brandon Robbins, on the right, Sam Ashton, and filling in for Cindy, who's under the weather, is Cody Caisse, Leominster School Committee member. Thank you all for joining us today. Issue 1, Fitchburg City Councilor Joel Caddy has submitted a petition to ban the use of single-use plastic bags within the city limits, which would apply to retail stores. Mike, this is a good idea?
Sounds nice in theory, but what's it going to do? It's going to, just one more example, just let's say we ban plastic bags in Fitchburg, then Fitchburg Market Basket, for instance, or Fitchburg Supermarket cannot carry plastic bags. So if someone is inconvenienced by that, what do? They go shop at that supermarket's location in Leominster. When we're trying to encourage business in the city of Fitchburg and we're trying to provide incentives for business in the city of Fitchburg, why should we put more roadblocks like this? I do think, look, if the petition had the effect of basically having just catching fire and plastic bags really be curtailed everywhere, I could see it. But all it's doing is poking little holes in the problem and attacking the issue in tiny little pieces. It's just not very efficient.
Sam Ashton.
Well, I'm generally opposed to this petition as plastic bag bans are done in favor of benefiting the environment, but that is not necessarily always the case. The EPA does not even consider them to be a hazard, and they also come with additional paper bags come with twice the price for local marketplaces.
Brandon.
I would be in favor of this. I really think that not only would this have a great environmental aspect to it, in a report, 100,000 sea turtles are killed every year due to thinking that a plastic bag is food. So I think this would be a good option, and it really starts, at the town level. We need to get towns involved in this. So I really think that having, Fitchburg take this on, maybe it could encourage surrounding cities to get on the bus and adopt a policy like this as well.
Cody Caisse.
I also support the measure. According to the Boston Globe, 28 billion pounds of plastic was dumped into the ocean last year. 100,000 marine life animals were killed due to plastic bags. Look, this is not the responsibility of any one city, but it's time that we start thinking of the collective, in my opinion. And I think, like Brandon said, I think Fitchburg could be the tip of the iceberg, and I think Leominster and surrounding communities should follow suit.
Fitchburg would be the 62nd community in the state out of 351 if they vote for this. Now, what I want to do is ask the both of you this question, because both of you are the ones supporting this. It's going before the city council. Mm-hmm. If the city council rejects it, there are other cities and towns like Chatham and Agawam and Lenox where the Board of Health has just instituted this. If the city council, the people's representative, votes it down, should that be the end of it, or would you be okay with the Board of Health issuing those regulations?
If you don't mind, I'll start. I don't think that the Board of Health should be the deciding factor on this issue. It's a controversial issue, and Fitchburg is a city that is really trying to attract business right now. And I can understand why a lot of people would think that this is just another roadblock to trying to prevent that. So I absolutely think it should be left to the people's representatives to decide.
I would have to agree with Cody. I think both in Fitchburg and in Leominster, the push right now is for transparency in our government and, really representing the people and, circumventing the process and having the Board of Health just institute a law like that. I really think that could end up in trouble.
And I ask that question because the two of you are from Leominster, and there is a history of an activist Board of Health in Leominster. The Board of Health in Leominster are the ones that instituted the regulations against smoking in restaurants and then in bars, and more recently instituted regulations which prevent retail establishments that have pharmacies from selling tobacco products. So the Board of Health has been pretty active in Leominster in terms of instituting these. Right. Michael?
I mean, we have a people being pigs with trash problem. We don't have a plastic bag problem per se. So what the thing that would concern me is that, again, overreach and it's not closely, if you're going to institute any sort of governmental control, any sort of governmental regulation, you have to sort of cut with the scalpel, not just hack off with a hacksaw, okay? And so, you know, we have, again, is this a plastic bag problem or is it a trash problem? And it's just, you know, the thing that sticks in my craw, and I said this in the Facebook group, you know, I'm not the oldest guy here, but
not by much.
But I'm old enough to remember that one of the reasons plastic bags came into existence because we were afraid we were cutting down all the poor little trees with the paper bags, and plastic bags were this godsend that, oh my goodness, we don't have to cut down all the trees anymore. Well, you know, so I mean, wouldn't it be nice? I mean, trees are a restorable, reusable resource and whatnot. I mean, wouldn't it be nice if we hadn't moved to plastic bags in the first place? So we have to look before we leap, before we do these types of things.
Well, see, where I agree with you, and especially where I agree with Sam, is that if something like this is enacted, it needs to be more than on a local level. It needs to be on a state level. You can't be pitting cities and towns against each other trying to attract businesses, especially when Fitchburg is desperately trying to attract business to voluntarily put themselves at a competitive disadvantage. I think would be foolish. But let's not fool ourselves into thinking that plastic bags don't pose an environmental problem, Michael, either. I mean, 10% of the plastic produced every year winds up in the ocean. 70% of it finds its way to the ocean floor where it will never degrade. Animals from shellfish to whales can ingest them, as Brandon talked about with the sea turtles. Every year, Americans discard 100 billion single-use plastic bags, and the average use time of a plastic bag is 12 minutes. And then it ends up on the ocean floor. And by the way, when we talk about recycling plastic bags, it's not done. And the reason it's not done is because recycling 1 ton of plastic bags costs $4,000. The recycled product can be sold for $32.
Well, let me ask you this. What percentage of those plastic bags are those bags you buy in the grocery section of the store that come 50 to a box, and in other words, the gallon or the quart size plastic bags that you use for storage? I mean, those aren't going away.
Those aren't either. No, but and, you know, and that's another conversation.
Yeah.
You know, but for the single-use plastic bags, there are alternatives. There are the reusable bags that, you know, supermarkets and retail establishments are encouraging the use of, and again, I'm not a big fan of government mandating. I think consumers and retailers can decide for themselves how they want to interact with business, but I do believe in education, and education starts with recognizing that plastic bags are a problem for the environment. Sam, last word.
So we were talking a lot about recycling. I just wanted to throw a number out there that 76% of plastic bags get recycled at least once during their lifetime. That's from an environmental agency report from the United Kingdom in 2011. Additionally, paper bags only have about a 20% chance of being recycled. The main solution isn't necessarily ban on either. The real solution is getting reusable bags that consumers can consistently take back. That cuts businesses' overall overhead, and in addition to making it easier on the consumer.
Issue 2. Massachusetts voters next year will be deciding whether to raise the minimum wage in Massachusetts from $11 an hour to $15 an hour over a 4-year period. Sam Ashton, should they be voting yes or no on raising that minimum wage?
They should not be voting yes. They should actually definitely be voting no. We've all heard this argument before that minimum wage leads to less low-paying jobs. 38% of employers say they plan layoffs if minimum wage increases, and 54% of employers say they plan to cut hiring altogether.
Brandon Robbins.
I would have to disagree. I really think that this is something that's, you know, been creeping up on us in these coming years. I really don't think that the minimum wage has kept up with the rate of inflation. I work at a food pantry. Today I was looking at the income requirements for somebody to use our food pantry. Somebody who works 40 hours at a minimum wage job still is eligible for the food pantry. I really think that somebody who's working a 40-hour-a-week job consistently should not need to use these assistance programs.
Cody Caisse.
I struggled on this one, I have to admit. In theory, I think it's a great idea. I think that there's a huge problem with a distribution of wealth in this country. That being said, I do think that the minimum wage at a $15, vote by the public going up that quickly would be a problem. It's not something I would support. You know, it's a substantial hike. I think that the federal government are the ones who really need to be taking action on the federal minimum wage at this point.
Michael.
Brandon and Cody do bring up some good points. I'm generally for a minimum wage because I think, unfortunately, it's a necessity in today's society. It needs to be a well-designed minimum wage. It needs to be an inflation-indexed minimum wage. Now, whether it should go to 15 that much so fast, that's where I have some hesitation. That's where I would agree with Sam and with Cody. But to Brandon's point, you need some mechanism to ensure that this thing keeps proper, keeps track with the rest wages. You need a well-designed minimum wage. Talked about like the plastic bag thing. You can't just make laws with a hacksaw. And I feel that with the minimum wage legislation in the past, that's kind of what we've done. We can have a so much better designed minimum wage policy if we're going to have it. Again, it's too bad we have to have it in the first place, quite honestly. You wish businesses would do the right thing. They're not going to do the right thing. We need a floor, but we need a well-designed floor.
Businesses are not going to do the right thing. Sam, I got a question for you because you brought up two arguments in opposition to the minimum wage. Number one, that it would hurt economically in terms of layoffs and economic growth, and the number two, I believe you brought up price increases and inflation.
Yes.
So the last time the federal government raised the minimum wage, which was under President Clinton, it led to the longest and largest expansion of our economy in peacetime in American history. Secondly, so we can talk about economic growth in that way. Also, Massachusetts raised their minimum wage from $8 an hour to $11 an hour over a 4-year period, and we are in better economic condition with a lower unemployment rate now than we did when we started at the lower unemployment rate. So let's, we can talk about historically economic growth. As far as prices go, in Massachusetts, the minimum wage is $11 an hour. In New Hampshire, it's $7.50. But the price of a cup of coffee at Dunkin' Donuts or a Big Mac at McDonald's is the same in New Hampshire as it is in Massachusetts. So we can talk about predictions, but how do you square predictions when history is showing otherwise?
So I actually went and crunched some numbers based off of Yahoo Finance information. So the majority of minimum wage jobs come from fast food industries, and the average income for fast food profit margin is 2.4% for fast food industries, and from $11 to $15 an hour, that would result in a 36.3% increase. Now, not everybody's going to get a raise with a minimum wage increase because some people are already making above minimum wage. So, assuming a 15% overall increase in labor would additionally, 35% of expenses is what labor makes up. That would factoring that 15% labor increase would result in a 5.3% increase in overall expenses, which would result in a 2.9% deficit, which would require businesses to take action either via unemployment or raising their prices. McDonald's, I've worked for McDonald's when we did the minimum wage increase from $8 an hour to $11 an hour. The price of a McDouble, one sandwich, used to be on the dollar menu, raised from $1 to $1.59. In other stores that in different states, that same sandwich is still $1 where they have the lower minimum wage.
Good. Brandon Robbins, last word.
I really strongly believe that somebody who's working 40 hours a week should not have to use any sort of, assistance program. And I think, both Michael and Cody, made point that they're nervous about it going up so quickly. I think if we take the track of raising it $1 every year, that's the solution.
Mm-hmm. Cody?
I completely agree. I think incrementally is the way to do it. I think that it takes a lot of the burden off of small business, and I do think that that's the way forward.
Well, and that is the proposal. It would be over a 4-year period. To go from 11 to 15 over a 4-year period. And with the big tax cut that businesses just got, maybe they could afford. Maybe they could work that minimum wage increase, right? Instead of it funneling all to the top to the shareholders, maybe some of those crumbs can come down.
Maybe. We'll have to wait and see.
They did just get a big tax cut, didn't they, Sam?
Well, hopefully that's how it'll work.
Spread the wealth? All right. Issue 3, speaking of the occupant of the White House, his proposed federal budget cuts 13% from the Department of Transportation programs geared towards public transportation and refocuses towards roads and bridges. So public transportation projects tend to favor urban areas, where roads and bridges repair tend to favor more rural areas. So the question is, going forward, do you agree with this shift in focus from public transportation to roads and bridges as proposed in this federal budget? Brandon.
I would have to oppose this. I really think that, public transportation is such an important piece of our society. We were talking about the plastic bag issue earlier and how, important to the environment that, could be. That same thing could apply here with this issue. If we were in society able to encourage people to use public transportation, we could be looking at a much cleaner environment.
Cody Caisse.
I think that transportation is the way of the future, but I think that right now we do need to be focusing on the shift towards roads and bridges. The U.S. Department of Transportation says that 42% of our roads are in bad condition. They say that 52.5% of our bridges are structurally deficient. As a citizen of Massachusetts, this concerns me, especially since we pay a great deal of taxes. We deserve better than this, and I think you got to start from the bottom up.
Michael.
Sadly, I have to agree with Cody because, and I say sadly because we talked about this off the air, Kevin. You and I have both been several times to Italy, and Italy, is not exactly swimming in money in terms of available projects for infrastructure. But you can go to the smallest, tiniest little town in Italy and get a bus. And between buses and trains and subways, you could get to any point in the country to any other point in the country pretty seamlessly and pretty efficiently. And I wish we could have stuff like that in this country. But here's the thing, and here's why I agree with Cody ultimately. It's because realistically, that's not what we want as a country. I mean, some of our biggest songs on the charts right now are these country songs where I get in my pickup truck and I just go off and, I got my freedom and America and all that other sort of stuff. And, and look, I've been wanting the metric. Italy in Europe has the metric system, and we should have that too, and we don't want that either. So I guess what I'm saying is, in a roundabout way, let them shift the darn money. Things aren't going to change around here. Let's fix the crumbling roads and bridges. I guess if we don't want public transportation that works well, we're not going to get public transportation that works well.
Sam Ashton.
Okay. I also would have to be for the shift from public transportation to roads and bridges. The United States has a D rating from the American Society of Civil Engineers on road quality. Additionally, we have roughly a $500 billion backlog in critical repair work to bridges. Additionally, these bridges are the same ones that are also used by public transit, so in the end, we're still benefiting everyone.
One of the things that always amazed me for years and years, I remember this name from the past, Mohammed Khan. He was executive director of MART, and he would get millions of dollars in federal grants and state grants to keep MART running. And all you see are these empty buses running all around Leominster and Fitchburg, spending millions of dollars. And we still see empty buses driving all around Leominster and Fitchburg, spending all this money. And every once in a while, we see, someone who advocates for public transportation going on Facebook and whining every time that the bus doesn't go from point A to point B, or if you change a polling place, that the bus doesn't go right to the polling place. You know what goes right to the polling place? In Uber. And that's in Uber. We have Lyft, and I think this is one of those examples. And I'm not that conservative, but I do believe that a lot of times the private sector can do things better than the public sector. So if we want to get people from point A to point B who may not have the means to own their own car and don't have their own transportation, have the government work with Uber drivers and have an agreement with them and give vouchers for people to use Uber. Any thoughts on that?
That's not a bad suggestion either. I really I like that idea. I think if there was some way that the government could work with like an Uber or a Lyft, and we need to make sure that people who can't afford a car, can get from point A to point B. So if that's the solution and that's the cheaper solution, maybe that's the way to go.
Michael, you talked about subways and trains that we ride over in Italy, taking the Trenitalia. You know, we have a subway in Boston, the T. How's that doing?
I don't know. Yeah, it's just not the same. Just not the same. I mean, you know, when you rely on that, you know, 1895 technology on the Green Line, it's just not quite cutting it, you know.
And also the corruption at the top too.
Sure.
I mean, look at how much has been uncovered in terms of investigations with people abusing pensions, people abusing overtimes, the deficits that that the T is running.
And that's the difference. In Italy and in Europe, you have no corruption. Cuts all that stuff out. It's just great. Yeah, works great.
So I mean, culturally, Cody, are we ready to make a shift from public transport? You know, people say, well, we need to go to move to public transportation. But to Michael's point, culturally, do we want to make that shift to public transportation?
Right now, no. I think in a couple of decades, possibly. I think, you know, the younger generations are really, you know, I actually, at the mayor's inauguration, he said some really interesting facts about, you know, the number of young people who are getting their driver's license at this point. It's remarkably low. So I think it's pretty clear that, you know, the millennial generation and even the generation below that want to ease away from cars, from private transportation. But at this point in time, I don't think that we're there yet.
Okay.
So we talked a lot about trains, and I'm going to advocate for something now that wasn't brought up yet. I would say if we're going to talk about trains, why don't we privatize Amtrak? Amtrak is already is basically halfway there, but going the full length could do wonders. The British rail system did that in 1995, and they saw a 117% increase in passengers, and the system was running 25% more efficient than it did when it had originally been public. So.
Would it be like the airlines where now they charge you for every piece of luggage, and they charge you for extra foot space,
But
and
they do charge for that. But if you want to go from point A to point B and you don't care, I mean, you can fly Spirit Airlines for $38 round trip.
Is the oxygen mask for free?
Mask is free. That's a part of the $36. That's what the government says you have to put on the plane. But I mean, that's one of the things is that the private industry is able to do that a little bit better and find, well, you pay literally for only what you want, and the government is just not as efficient with doing that, and the procurement process is usually a bit more difficult when you're working in the government.
Can you imagine the strikes? If they proposed in Italy for the trains to be taken over by the private sector, can you imagine the strikes that would happen? That would be
the garbage
awesome.
men would go on strike first, just to wreak havoc.
Right.
Which I think they already did in Fitchburg this week, by the way.
They pick up your trash yet?
No.
Oh.
No. I put in the group today that I think if my barrels stay at the end of the driveway for any longer, then I start taxing them as an ancillary.
You might as well build a little shed around it.
As an ancillary structure on my property.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be last Friday, but they've been out there for a while now. So does technology too play a role in this? Because people that want to carpool, people that don't want to ride alone, that want to pool resources, there's so many apps out there that you can just go on and find people that are commuting from, say, Leominster to Waltham every day, or Leominster to Fitchburg to Framingham, and you can find those people and you can carpool with them. So does that take the shift off public transportation also?
It could. I really think that's more of a stretch than, you know, the Uber proposal. I just don't see people, you know, going out, finding, you know, Joe Schmo to take a ride to work with. I'm not sure that that's necessarily where, if we can't get people on a public bus, I'm not sure we can get them in a car with, you know, their neighbor that they don't know.
Very good. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, if people like traveling with people they know, and I don't think if they already work together, that'd be one thing. But if it's something that, hey, this person works a block away from you and also lives a block away from you, why don't you just ride together? I think that'd be a tough thing to sell right away.
So it looks like everyone here at the table, well, not I don't know, did you evolve in this conversation with us while we were
You pushed me
talking?
with the Uber thing. You pushed me a little bit.
So are we all in agreement with the guy in the White House right now on something?
Oh boy.
Don't put it that way.
Probably first, but I would say
Should we leave now?
Can we get Cindy in on like on Skype or something?
She's probably commenting away on this
Yeah.
as we, I don't know. You think she's going to take public transportation? You think she's going to get on a bus and put her Mercedes behind and get on a bus? Their heated seats?
Yeah. Or well, even more importantly, you think she's going to go against Trump? Oh,
No.
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 All right. Well, I guess we're stuck.
She probably has one of those heated, like, coffee holders in that Mercedes,
Yeah.
too.
Coffee
Yeah.
just never gets cold.
Yeah.
But it's her Mercedes. It keeps shorting out. It doesn't really work. So.
Very good. So, exit question. Last week, Fitchburg City Council passed new rules, and part of their new rules is instituting a dress code for their members and for city employees that appear before the City Council, that they need to dress business casual. Cody Caisse?
I agree with it, actually. Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I mean, we're public servants. We're here on behalf of the people. I think we should dress the part.
You always look good when I watch those city council meetings. Really, no, you do.
Well, thank you.
You always dress professionally. You dress professionally tonight, and then you have someone sitting next to you that wears shorts and sandals. I mean, another one that sits across from you that wears tie-dye T-shirts. I mean, you're representing the constituents.
Right, and I don't look down on people who, dress casually.
Why not?
That's their own prerogative, but, I do support the idea. I think a dress code's perfectly reasonable.
Which is, by the way, is different from the Leominster City Council. Leominster City Council, for as long as I can remember, from well before I was on to when I was on and to this day, all of them show up at those meetings looking professional.
Oh, they really do.
Yeah.
They really do. They understand their. Michael?
I agree with I agree with what Fitchburg's doing. Yeah.
Sam?
well, it's not a rule until it has to be a rule, and it has to be a rule.
So you're okay with that, with
I'm
setting
okay
a
with
rule for a dress
I'm okay with
code?
the rule because, I mean, they weren't showing up looking professional, then it's time to mandate it.
Yeah, you looked at some of those, if you watch, and you can still look them up on, if you go to the FAT.org website and look up some of those city council meetings in Fitchburg from the summer, it looked like, they're going to the swimming hole in Alabama for a picnic instead of conducting city business. Brandon?
Yeah, I think we're all going to have to agree again. I really think that, like Cody said, these people are public servants. It's important to go, dress nicely. Like he said, I wouldn't look down on anybody that does, but it's unfortunate that it needed to be mandated. But it has to be done.
That's to me, that's the saddest part, is that it had to get to the point where you actually had to put it in writing that don't show up at a city council meeting looking like a bum.
It seems to me like one of the unspoken rules. You should just know that this is not what you do. But I guess
Right.
sometimes you got to do what you got to do.
And we'll give credit. Councilor Kuchmarek was the one that, Council President Kuchmarek was the one that proposed the rule, who has always shown up at the meetings looking his best and representing the city top notch.
Yeah.
So, any other words on that one? Well, with that, go ahead.
No, I just think I think that Cody, we talked about in the focus episode ways to build unity and camaraderie. Mm-hmm. I'd say that you make a motion for the Leominster School Committee to have a dress code. To Kevin's point, that way.
It's not the worst idea.
Yeah.
So when they say when even little kids dress up to go to restaurants, they behave better. So maybe that. All right, I got reusable bags for all of you. Okay. 50 cents. You don't need any plastic bags. You don't need to kill trees. I got one for each of you.
Well, thank you.
It's the way of the future right here.
Yeah. Michael,
This is the solution.
it's filled with thoughts and prayers. That's it for Flap TV. Have a good day. Thank you for joining us.